are talking Dune Drifter, this one written and directed by Mark Price, and starred Phoebe Sparrow as Adler, Daisy Atkins as Aaran. Now this is one part Battlestar Galactica, as in the newer series, and one part the first act of Enemy Mine. So we are in a kind of space opera setting where we have these human forces that are fighting against this somewhat ill-defined enemy, if we're honest. And the movie starts off with kind of a classic space opera space battle, and we have this one particular ship that gets damaged and crash lands on this kind of nearby planet, and this has the pilot and the gunner of which is seriously injured. Now, the pilot essentially has to try and brave the wastelands of this desolate planet in hopes of getting some kind of missing part that she needs to kind of repair her ship from a enemy craft which has also kind of landed on this planet. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So this is a relatively low budget movie. In fact, it's pretty low budget. And I have to kind of prefix this by saying I feel a lot of the criticisms I've seen of this are levied against the budget. But here's where I think this movie does do pretty well. I think the opening space battles for a low budget film are pretty effective. I was actually reminded quite a bit of a mix of mainly kind of the newer Battlestar Galactica series with this kind of more functional kind of tech and suits and things like that, but hints of the original Star Wars movie, you know, A New Hope, if you want to call it that. For example, the old school heads up display kind of stuff like that. They all shout out Grey 5 standing by and all this kind of stuff. So there's elements of the kind of the original Star Wars movie, at least the kind of the assault on the Death Star sequence. But the aesthetic feels more like Battlestar Galactica, although you do have like explosions in space and sound in space, things like that. So it's not trying to be a science accurate kind of depiction of, you know, space warfare. But it does remind you of those kind of movies that used to come out in the wake of Star Wars. You know, you kind of your Star Raiders, your Battlestar Galactica, it's the original series in a way, Battle Beyond the Stars, those type of, you know, plethora of kind of space opera type movies and kind of TV shows that we had in the wake of Star Wars. And I have to say the effects on those space battles, for a low budget film, I was pretty impressed with, to be honest. And it does have that slightly more functional vibe that you got from the newest Battlestar Galactica series, where it seems they're a bit more sort of down to earth in the way they're kind of the acting and the kind of the human sort of side of stuff more being so much in the space fantasy kind of stuff. So those sequences I thought were quite impressive in regards to technical abilities. I thought they I mean, I've seen some criticism still of those, but I actually thought they were quite well handled and quite well shot, and actually looked pretty decent, to be honest with you. Problem comes when we kind of land on the planet, if I'm honest, but even before I get to that, if I'm having to talk about some of the negatives here, I feel the world of this movie is somewhat ill-defined. As I've said, we know very little about the kind of the enemy. I'm not even quite sure if they're alien or kind of like an offshoot of humanity. There is a lot of dialogue between the pilots, but unfortunately they have an overuse of kind of distortion for obviously kind of radio signals and things like that, and people kind of like screaming or breathing heavily when they're talking, and the dialogue is actually quite difficult to understand. So to be honest with you, and this is not even just true, this is true of when they land on the planet as well. So I gotta say, I think the dialogue was poorly handled. Realistic as it may be, it's hard to listen to because I feel like I was missing things because I couldn't really understand what they were saying. And this is an English-speaking film. So there were some technical issues I had with that. Then we get to the planet, and as I've mentioned, it kind of reminds me of the first act of Enemy Mine, because that's all there is in this movie. It's this woman crash landing on this space, on this planet, and then going for a jaunt, and then encountering some enemy, and that's pretty much the movie. And it's the bulk of the running time. And I've got to be honest with you, the planet stuff is boring. Again, there's problems with the dialogue. Our kind of co-pilot character, I've got to be honest with you, overacts, and again, is trying to talk, poor direction here, trying to talk through gasping and things like that. And as dramatic as that might seem, I can't understand what she's saying. Things like this. And then we have long periods actually without dialogue because the other woman is kind of going off on her own, trying to kind of find a particular part. The aliens, or whatever they're supposed to be, are just people in motocross armour and gas masks. I have no really idea what they're supposed to be or what their deal is. Absolutely none. I have no idea what their motivation is. And our main character seems to be saddled with the most ineffective laser gun I've ever seen. There's a bit of dialogue about how their shields are good or something like that. But you're literally better off throwing rocks at these things rather than having this kind of laser gun. Literally, because that's what she does. So again, there's some poor decisions here, and I have to say, once we do get down to the kind of the planet stuff, it is pretty dull. There's just not enough plot here. There's not enough world building. I didn't think the acting was particularly good. I wouldn't say necessarily go as far to say bad acting necessarily, but somewhat overacting in places. I thought the production design on the kind of the more planetary stuff was quite boring and kind of plain looking. Really not enough to go on here. I thought this was going to be an enemy mine kind of clone, but it doesn't get that far, you know. So it's a pretty uninteresting movie. I think that the opening kind of sequence where we have these kind of space battles, that I will commend because I thought that was well handled. And it would have been nice maybe to have a movie more focusing on that, because I did think they were quite well done, and it just seems that they've spunked the budget in the kind of the first act and then literally just had someone kind of wandering around a kind of desert type area fighting people with gas masks. You know, it gets pretty poor. Not one I can really recommend. Maybe this could have been kind of remade with more emphasis on, I think, which is more of an interesting and maybe a little bit more thought out. I wonder why it's called Dune Drifter as well, because that just seems like it's trying to, because obviously the Dune movie was supposed to have been out by now, and I wonder if this was marketed as a kind of a mockbuster, so to speak, because there's really not any dunes in this, if we're honest. Although there is like a deserty planet, it's not like particularly arid, or it doesn't face things like, you know, dehydration and nothing like that. So it's kind of, it seems like more of a marketing ploy to try and get into the Dune space. But realistically, it's more like Enemy Mine and Battlestar Galactica. That is more like what this movie is. But it's disappointing because it opens so strong, and really you want to close strong, if anything. They should maybe have had the space battle at the end. I mean, obviously, I know she's got a crash, but it would have at least ended on a high note. But because this is, as it is, it ends on somewhat of a damp squib. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. A below average mark. I don't really think this is particularly enjoyable. If you really like Enemy Mine and Battlestar Galactica, I think there may be some sequences here at least that you may be of interest to you. But yeah, the B-movie space opera ain't what it used to be. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.